Revelation Unraveled, Part 4, Original Sin. Mary's role in crushing the head of Satan was precipitated by Adam and Eve's fall from grace in the Garden of Eden. Some claim that since Eve sinned first, women must be inferior creatures, and God would never give such an exalted role to Mary. But if you find it difficult to see Mary's crucial role in these end times, you will find it even more difficult to accept my claim that women are, sad to say, morally superior to men. How often have we heard, for example, that women cannot be Roman Catholic priests because they are inferior to men? I say this is a complete falsehood. Well, not completely, because it's true that women cannot be priests or heads of households for that matter. But the reason is not because women are inferior. It's rather because they are in fact morally superior. In this chapter, I will attempt to explain this contradiction. If women are in fact superior, is there a decisive way? That is a biblical way to prove it. Certainly in the beginning, man and woman, meaning Adam and Eve, were created equal. Neither Adam nor Eve had any superiority over the other. When God first shows Eve to Adam, he exclaims, "At last, flesh of my flesh and bone of my bone." This can only connote absolute equality. Even those who disagree with my premise that women are superior must admit that the equality which existed between the sexes at creation is no longer in force. Most Christians would immediately recognize that the problem is original sin. But if women are morally superior to men, that can only mean that the original sin of woman, that is Eve's sin, must not have been as serious as Adam's. If this is true, wouldn't women make better priests? Of course, if there were no original sin, there would be no need for priests. The reason Adam's original sin was worse than Eve's is because he succumbed to the temptations from his wife, that is, another human being. Eve, on the other hand, succumbed to the wiles of Satan himself, a supernatural creature. Eve, therefore, had more excuse to fail. Accordingly, many claim that if Adam had not fallen, there would have been no original sin whatsoever. It is Adam's greater guilt that makes him and men in general morally inferior to Eve and all women. A priest friend of mine disagrees with me and says I hear women's confessions. Some may claim men are superior because when God came to earth and took on human flesh, he came as the man, Jesus Christ. God could have been incarnated as a woman. But Scripture says he humbled himself and became man. If he could have humbled himself more by becoming a woman, he would have. But he humbled himself to the max by adopting the lowest form of humanity, manhood. If all this is true, isn't it obvious that a clear case could be made for women to be priests? No, because although women are morally superior, they still are tainted by original sin and are not perfect. To avoid the sin of Eve, women must do the opposite of Eve. Her sin was one of pride, succumbing to the serpent's promise of achieving wisdom, of knowing good and evil, and therefore becoming like God. Women's hope in perfecting themselves now means that they must humble themselves, thereby reversing Eve's original sin of pride. Adam's sin was of putting the woman before God and not resisting Eve's suggestions. To correct Adam's sin of acquiescence to evil, man must now assert his authority and lead himself and the woman back to God's standard. It is very tempting for Catholic bishops to resolve the shortage of priests by advocating women priests. This plan will fail, just as it has in other Christian denominations where it has been tried. The men simply stop going to church. Then you have no shortage of priestesses, but a shortage of congregation. Even in Catholic parishes, where the first step has been taken in this direction, with the introduction of altar girls, the would-be altar boys soon quit, and the result is one priest surrounded by female lectors, female Eucharistic ministers, and female altar servers. Since most priestly vocations in the past came from the ranks of altar boys, replacing altar boys with girls merely exacerbates the shortage of priests. Men like Adam are more than willing to let women take over, but in doing so they abdicate their responsibility to assert authority and to be the moral leaders of mankind, thereby reversing the sin of Adam. Women chafe at being in a lower social position and are eager to show off their higher moral knowledge. But by not being humble, they are not reversing the sin of Eve and instead are perpetuating it. So why do men lessen their church attendance when morally superior women are allowed behind the pulpit? Because the man says, "I cannot be as good as she is," and walks out. Thus, weak-willed bishops who advocate women priests are repeating the sin of Adam by not exercising their authority, while feminist nuns who want to be priests are repeating Eve's sin of pride. They ignore God's dictum to Eve, that because of her original sin, you will be under your husband's power, and he shall have dominion over you.